So I've entered into an interesting debate with Carl and Loretta Scruggs on Facebook. And I'm not even sure if it's Carl or Loretta, but I suspect that it's Carl because I share the account in that. And we've gotten into an interesting debate where I've been challenged whether or not I can disprove their belief in hell. I've made a bold statement that I don't think they actually believe that, and I can prove it. And Carl and or Loretta Scruggs said, go for it. And I posed this question. I said, how would it feel? How would you feel about human beings? How would you feel about human beings? Some of them you know, many of them you know, some of them you love, like loved ones. How would you feel about human beings being tortured consciously forever? Unending, eternal, conscious torment. And I haven't gotten an answer yet. I haven't gotten an answer. But the thought of that idea is hideous to my soul. I came face to face with this idea. I was taught it in church and then Bible college and then seminary. And I was ordained and was a Navy chaplain under this way of thinking. And I thought it was my purpose in life to save people from eternal conscious torment. I was taught that, and that was like my theological underpinnings in my primary years. I mean, from 18 on and all the way up to Iraq, I followed this Baptist flavored Protestant Baptist, pathway to God, their theology of God and the universe. And I was devoted to it, man. I was a very devoted follower of their way and their ideas. And this is how I got hooked into it. And I respect them a lot for this. But they use the Bible a lot. And they really honestly try to believe the Bible and follow the Bible and obey the Bible according to how they understand it. But unfortunately, they use a King James version of the Bible. It's an English translation. You've probably heard of it. Only the most influential book that's ever been made. and a damn interesting... First of all, its contribution to the world made God's word accessible to English-speaking people. Actually, it was really just an approved version, but there was another version before it that wasn't that one, that was actually way more popular at the time. But it was the freedom to distribute the Bible in English and the ability to mass produce it and spread it to everyone that was such a breakthrough. And because this was the official one endorsed by none other than King James, that's why it's called the King James Version. I mean, what a marketing genius. We got like marketers nowadays online and teenagers getting like millions views. This guy named the English Bible after himself and flooded the market with it and put his competitors out of business. And now, like 500 years later, let me see, 1611, so 400 years later, 413 years, 14 now years later, we have access to the English Bible named King James version, and that's what I cut my teeth on. I learned that Old English, which is actually quite intelligent form of English too. It like really expands your brain in a lot of different directions. But unfortunately, it was translated with theological bias. Yeah. I didn't know this at the beginning of my pursuit of God, because I met God personally and had an experience with him, and then I went looking for answers in the church. And then it's like they got the Bible, they're in charge of the church. It's like they're the ones waving the Jesus banner, so it seemed kind of like an obvious path to follow. And it was good for me in like an abundance of ways. But it had one like built-in little tricky thing that primarily flows from the King James Version Bible, English Bible, but has its roots way back, all the way back to Emperor Justinian the Great, man, 543. He signed it in his own handwriting. He didn't even get a staff theologian to write it for him. When he outlawed the gospel of Jesus Christ. Wrote in his own hand. He was quite a devout and religious man, and a great legislator, therefore earning him the title Justinian the Great. And he laid down laws that are still practiced by about half of the planet. Ever heard of common law? Yeah, he revived Julius Caesar's laws and brought them up to date. He was an excellent administrator. Guy was an excellent man. He was so efficient at running government and a great legislator at writing tasks that need to be done and assigning them and managing them. And he was devoted to the understanding of Christianity that a Roman emperor was accustomed to. All power. And so Christianity falls under the purview of the state now, vis-a-vis Emperor Constantinian in 325. Thanks, Emperor Constantinian. You made a little interesting contribution to history. Whether it was a good thing or a bad thing is, I guess, dependent on your interpretation of it. But when you joined the church and the state together, which one do you think lost that battle? What do you think? You think the state, with all of her power, and now owns the bureaucracy of the machinations of that which calls itself the Christian church? Where do you think the more power was levied from? The state, those who seek power for power's sake, or those who lay down their life for others? Yeah, I think the state kind of won that one too. And so by the time Justinian the Great came along, dude, he was wielding power excellently as really like a makeshift pope. And he was responsible for a fifth church council that is the first disputed council of all. The first four, like most of all the Christians of all times and all places, all denominations kind of agree with. And then at the fifth one, it takes a turn, and then there's like some people that are like, no, that ain't legit, and others that were like, no, it was legit. And so the Christianity is split on the fifth church council already, and there's reasons for the split that have never been resolved. One of those things was literally this idea that everyone goes to heaven. It was the original idea of Christianity. It's in the New Testament. You can read it for yourself. In fact, there's a whole other book before it we call the Old Testament that really is some important background material to understand before you can really grasp the New Testament. But you've heard it probably if you live in Western civilization enough to know that it shapes your worldview, and every year you practice Christmas and you practice Easter. No matter what your views are, the world stops for those two dates. It's kind of interesting little thing. It doesn't absolutely prove that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, because you can always point to the machinations of why the world stops twice a year for those, and then it sounds like a plausible explanation. But literally, what other plausible explanation could account for the guy with the miraculous story who literally was martyred, and everyone agrees he was martyred, and everybody agrees he's a good guy? Think of this. Can you think of anyone else, and I mean anyone else, besides Jesus, that doesn't have like anything bad to say about? Like, no one ever said anything bad about Jesus ever, except like people made up stuff about they didn't like his religious ideas and it offended their religious ideas, and so they accused him of being a criminal for that. But that was just a clash of ideology, man, and his teachings were catching on, and he was gaining popularity, and they were losing their share of the market, and they were all pissed off about it, man. And he was showing them up too, because it was like he's like new improved religion, man. It was like all these Jews that had this religion for like a long time and following Moses by the book. It turned into a letter of the law kind of thing, and they lost touch with the reason why the letter of the law exists, which is to guide your heart so that you can live a heartfelt, emotionally fulfilled life, and like protect that heart from getting so bashed in that it doesn't feel anything at all, because if it felt anything, it would just hurt. And so it's like a way of life that protects your heart from getting battered and bruised. If like we just follow it, it's like, dude, does anybody disagree that healthy marriages are a great idea? I mean, does anybody object to a healthy marriage? I mean, because honestly, I don't think I've ever really like run into somebody who did. Man, I don't know. What would they object to? Say you got two healthy adult individuals who, they're like fully functioning and not dysfunctional, and they're not all full of like past traumas and like self-sabotaging thinking, whatever, and they're taking care of themselves, and they're taking care of their mind, they're taking care of their emotions, they're taking care of their life, their finances, being responsible, avoiding addictions, and like they're fully developed and enjoying life. And then they find somebody else that's kind of like them, and they get along together. They mate well. So they decide to go it together and form a bond of love and commitment. And come hell or high water, they hold to that commitment so much so that the other can come to rely and depend on them. Yep. I don't think anybody's objecting to the idea of that. I think there's people that are objecting to the pain that comes with somebody not holding their end of the bargain. And the pain that comes with them not holding up their end of the bargain, because, if a marriage is broken up because somebody didn't hold up their end of the bargain, then that means for every marriage that broke up, there's somebody out there living with like that pain and guilt and shame. Or else they're just refusing to face their own behavior so they don't have to feel it, but that'll just keep them stunted, and they'll just keep making the same mistakes until they deal with it. But man, if they deal with it, they learn, they mature, they grow up, and they find someone else to live their life with that they can count and depend on. If you treat each other well in a relationship like that and you look out for each other, it kind of protects the heart, actually. Like, people think it's going to damage their heart, but actually it's the most protective thing that they can do, to bond with another human being and like legit bond with that human being. Yeah, man, it's like one of the most beautiful things that human beings are capable of doing. And we're living in some crazy times where people are damaging themselves pretty badly, making it almost impossible for that to happen. Yeah, man, it's like, think of it. let's say if you think it's a good idea to be in a relationship with somebody who's healthy and can bond, and you bond to them, and you don't abuse each other, but you help each other and you love each other, you work together for common good and common goals, like that, um like that's like kind of a little bit better than having to go it alone, and then deal with relationships in a shallow or impermanent way. And you can't get too stuck in your heart on a relationship that's not permanent, because it's like, hey, if we're not both all in here, then there's obviously an end to this relationship coming at some point. And it's like, if the relationship is coming to an end at some point, then that's going to hurt, right? Yeah, it's going to hurt if a relationship comes to an end. You don't want to get hurt, so you got a couple of options. It's like, you can not have a relationship where you're very emotionally invested in, but on a short-term basis, it meets a need and keeps you from being lonely. But if it's not forever, you kind of want to brace yourself for the blow and minimize it by not getting too emotionally involved, and it didn't hurt as much. And you never even know. Even if you like her, she's still got a whole half of the equation where she gets to decide. And so you kind of got to be careful with your heart there. You also want to get to know a girl enough to make a good decision. But here's where it gets tricky. This is the tricky part right here. I'm single. I know this. This is the tricky part. If you sleep around with girls you do not intend to make a commitment to, it really opens you up to so much risk. And I'm not just talking about like STD type stuff. I'm talking about heart risk. Like literally, if you have sex with somebody and you first of all, you got two choices: bond with them, don't bond with them. Okay. There's a little interesting fork in the road to decide which path to take. Bond with them, don't bond with them. Okay, well, they're hot, so I'm going to bond with them. They're interesting. And spending time with them is kind of like a drug. But making a decision to bond with somebody that is not fully vetted and can't maybe be the best lifetime partner for some reason or other, it's better to find that information out before you bond with them. Otherwise, it's going to hurt. Boom, because you bonded with them and then you found out some like stuff that just didn't work for you. But the other choice is don't bond with them. And this is another interesting little pathway. Don't bond with them. And now you're laying a pattern inside your own brain and mind for doing the exact opposite of the thing that you think would be like awesome, to bond with somebody for life that you love and they'll love you back and you can count on each other and build a life together. So like you say you want this forever, you want to bond with somebody, but now you're starting to fuck with the bonding mechanism by turning it off and disassociating it from the act of sex. So you're fucking with a system you don't really want to fuck with, man. What if you turn that system off and like sex and bonding are disconnected? They don't connect anymore. And then you find somebody that you'd like to connect with, but you fucked up the system, man, and it can't bond very well. And it can't weather storms. It's frightened and anxious in relationships, and that frightened, anxious behavior actually kills the relationship, freaks the other person out. Yeah. Shit is going to be resolved. Or, man, if you disconnect bonding and sex, it almost makes it impossible. I wouldn't say it does make it impossible because we live in an interesting world. We'll forgive and overlook a lot. But man, if you don't bond emotionally with your mate when you have sex, it's like that's really like one of the core best ingredients of a great relationship is that you bond emotionally through the act of sex. The porno shit that's going on nowadays, looking at this stuff is like totally fucking up that bonding mechanism, man. Yeah, if you're on it, please do yourself a favor and stop. It is like fucking up one of the most important parts of you. You don't want to disconnect your bonding mechanism from your sexuality. Yeah, because you might not be able to connect it back well enough to not end up lonely. Yeah. Starting to see like a lot of this where there's older Americans with damaged relationships winding up lonely. Yep. But it's still true that most people are like in a marriage relationship at the time one of them, the first one goes. People like to be married and they should be married. But they don't like to get hurt. And sometimes it seems like it's taken a few wallops to learn the lesson. I own a wedding chapel, so I do like a lot of weddings, like thousands. And it's pretty cool to see all these couples in love and hear their love story and everything. And they're bonding for life, like before God, like before a minister. I'm like with God and blessing them, and they're like getting like married, man of God married right there at the walk-in wedding chapel for a low price. And I'm doing all like my stuff, man, like my Navy chaplain stuff. I'm just like doing it for the public in Jacksonville on the weekends, like 3 days a week. But I get to hear all these beautiful love stories, and I'm telling you, also I was 25 years in a marriage, and I'd still be in that marriage if I had not volunteered to go to Iraq because I came home all messed up from that war. And the poor girl finally had the courage to leave me. Oh, best woman, man. I gave me his best, and man, I came home broke from Iraq and lost her. Yeah, our lives kind of took different directions after that, man. I had a lot of healing to do, and she was taking off in life. Yeah. If you see this, Christy, proud of you, baby. You're great. I wish you all the best out there. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't think there's any arguing against that kind of a situation. I think it's what everybody deep down hopes for. But I think we're starting to hurt ourselves as a society with some of the things that we're doing. And as a minister, as a chaplain, yeah, it's difficult for me to like see it and like see people like making decisions that cause them to hurt. And I trust God, and I've hurt more than most humans can understand, but sorry about that. I think I'm hurting a little bit tonight thinking about all those guys in Iraq I ministered to and the hell of it all. And really, war is absolute hell. That is accurately described as an experiencer of war. And like the end of the war too, man. I was the last Navy chaplain in the Iraq War. Now there were Army chaplains behind me when I left. Thank God for those men and women. The best men and women I ever met in my entire life. But I was the base command group chaplain at Al Assad, the entry and exit point country, and I was the last BCG chaplain there, and I was there until September, and then they got out of the country in December. So there were a lot of great chaplains behind me, a lot of great chaplains before me too. I'll tell you that much. But I had, man, it's an especially interesting post at an especially interesting time in history. The last one there after 9 years of war. And I sat there and listened to them tell me about their war stories. How many deployments you've been on? Some of these guys, they're like maybe 30 and they've been on some of them 3 or 4. Some of them had four trips to the sandbox from the beginning of the war to this one. A lot of them had 3. Many of them had 2. Yeah, this wasn't their first rodeo. There was a lot of re-upping during that time. Guys coming back again. So there's dudes there that were there at the beginning, and there's dudes there that were there in the middle, and there were dudes there that was like every step of the way. I ran into like soldiers who knew that war personally, not just the time that we overlapped. And Afghanistan too, man, that's another interesting one. Some of these guys did tours in both wars. Man, I knew a great chaplain of mine I went to school with, and he is an incredible human being. And he did Afghanistan and Iraq. Did Iraq first, and I got the war experience through their eyes, but more importantly, through their emotions. Yeah, man, and I'm an empath and a feeler. I was like perfectly groomed for this job in my childhood, having 2 very interesting parents. Expanded my emotional capacity a great deal, my empathy to cover for the interesting life we had as a child. But I wouldn't trade it for anything, man. It was like yeah, you know the kind of situations that kids grow up in that stretches them and makes them more empathetic and more caring and more, whatever, reaching, striving, trying to find some unmet child need and the struggle through life, as a feeler. It molds you, man. It molds you, shapes you. It really does. Being a feeler, it's like the people who turn it off and they don't feel, they disconnect from their emotions. These are like maybe the saddest of all. Yeah, I feel sad for the people that don't feel, that have disconnected from their emotions, and I can understand why, man. When you got a lot of hurt to do, it's better to feel nothing than to hurt. So just disconnect. But I want to tell you something. From a feeler who felt a lot of good, the best good. I was Christy's husband, man. She was the best wife ever. At the time, we changed and grew. Now we just not meet each other's needs. But for a young man, she took great care of me. Yeah, proud of her. But I also know like the tough parts of life. Yeah. Parental situations. All right, look, I don't want to like put all like the dirt out and stuff. I'm trying to learn how to honor my father and mother and not carry resentments and let shit go. But you can't really know my story and you can't really know me without talking about the forces that shaped me and made me. And that is like my parental forces. And I have fully come to appreciate the challenges we had as a family. Because whatever I experienced, they experienced worse, and then my ancestors before them experienced worst. So literally, it has been an unfolding of like bad situations for a few generations. Starting with my grandfathers, neither of which had a father. One was a total orphan. Yeah. So the chain was broken. The baton wasn't passed to either of those men. Those were my grandfathers. And so, they didn't get the best onboarding, you can say. And then they had to grow up fast and tough and poor. Georgia, North Carolina. They were all from North Carolina, but I hear their ancestors were from Georgia. Or my other grandpappy, my mom's dad, man, he was somewhat of a mixed breed, but the whole story is not fully known, and it's been told different ways. And so I know he was a half. His mother was a Cherokee Indian woman, like a Cherokee Indian tribe from the Cherokee Indian woman. But his grandfather is not really fully known because the story was that he died before Louis Edward Osment was born. But he was never in his life, so that may be true. But the identity of his dad is unknown, and he told me himself that he was the son of a black man. He told me that face to face. So that story, resonated deeply with me. But it gets a little more complicated because his half sister inherited him at 4 when his mom died. His dad had never been there. He supposedly died. And forgot what I was saying. His mom died. His dad inherited. Anyway, his mean sister used to really torture him, and she was only a half sister, and times were tough back then, and she kind of didn't appreciate having to take him on. It was not like a welcome situation. I understand from his daughter, my aunt, and she mistreated him pretty badly, and so she could have just made that up, and that was a lie. It's not really known. He did have a darker complexion. He did have a little bit of wavy hair. So it's plausible even by his features. But I can't nail it down. But there's a good chance. I'm definitely some Cherokee on that side. So he is half. My mom would be a quarter. So I'm an 1/8 Cherokee Indian by his mother. And I may also be 1/8 African American by his father. It's possible. 1/8. Does that count? Am I in the club? Can I get in the club? I'm 1/8. I got 1/8. 1/8. 1/8. Will you take me? Come on, let me in. I'm 1/8. It's so funny that we measure this stuff by skin color. It has nothing to do with skin color, man. It has to do with spiritual lineage and family lines and stuff, man. This is just skin that can, turn any direction it wants to. But it's the color of the skin is not directly correlative to the spiritual lineage of the soul, man. And just in your skin, there can be dominant skin types or dominant phenotypes, souls too, man. It's just okay, a mom and a dad, makes a baby. Okay. Well, like mom's got her like soul type and dad's got his soul type, and now there's a new soul type that's a whole soul type. Like each of us are like our own individual personal own body. We got our own soul, and it's uniquely independent from mom and dad. And when it had to like meld two into one, it pick and chose. Like some features were dominant, some were recessive, passive. And those are the features that show. Well, okay, that happened with your skin and your eyes and your hair and everything. It also happened with the soul, and the more dominant souls, tend to procreate more, tend to pass down more. It's like you see it in the lineage of the Bible. There's like more dominant souls and more passive souls. Stuff even in family lines, you got like head of the family and all this kind of stuff. And so it's just like your genes, your souls, and it creates. You got a new soul, and it's got its own like soul type, and it's got its own soul preferences, and it came from the family line. And some of it is like the 1/8 over here, and some of it's just. In fact, the 1/8 over here could actually have like really dominant genes, and you see this sometimes in like generational photos. Like the 1/8 over here is so dominant that you see like the same. Like the next generation, they look like the same, and then it's like the next generation looks the same, and you're like, looks like his father, looks like his grandfather. You can like trace those looks back generationally because of the dominance of those genes. Same thing with the soul, man. So it doesn't matter what the skin said. What did the soul say? Dude, I'm like certain I got like a fat portion of soul from that man. So much my mind I got from that man. He was a pure genius. My grandfather, whatever he was a pure genius, man. Just man, is a genius orphan. It's crazy, man. That man was orphaned and beaten and just molested. Whatever happens to orphan kids back then in the 1920s and the Great Depression and stuff. And then, whatever it was, it turned him into kind of a mean alcoholic man, very violent and abusive. And that was my mother was one of his many children. And he was a very loving man also, incredibly how those two things went together. But there was this intermingling of love and commitment with like abuse and like lack of intimacy or engulfment type shit going on. And I can't trace any direct like pedophilia or anything like that in either side of the family. So there was a morality about the whole thing centered around the King James Version of the Bible. And I ain't shitting you, but that's where it's where it comes full story. The King James Version of the Bible was the primary foundational book of understanding for how to live a life. And morality and all. Forgiveness, all. Sin, punishment, heaven, hell. A word that exists in the English Bible but does not exist in the original manuscripts. I went to their schools and I learned Greek. I literally learned Greek. Yeah, I know. I'm just as surprised as you are. Trust me. But no, I no shit did it, dude. I did it. I learned how to translate the Greek, and I can translate the Greek. There's my proof. I don't even need to show you my educational credentials anymore. But they tinkered with the scriptures badly. And the interesting thing is, it's not mistranslated. It's not mistranslated according to the tools that I have to utilize. But these are also the guys who write the tools. So, it's just like, all right, if the guy's measuring and the guy's making the measuring rods are the same people, there's a little chance of collusion on that. You know, if a 12-inch ruler is only 11 inches, they can sell more of them, more of them that they manufacture. If they're also the guy making the decision on how many to buy and where to put them, and they can get a monopoly on the business, and it's kind of what they did with religion, man. And I already told you about where it started under Justinian the Great, but it manifested in English form through the King James Version Bible, and that shaped my life. The King James Version Bible shaped my life. I can show you copies I've had of it since I was 3 years old. My name on it from my grandmother. Governed our family's life. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff that didn't fit in between the lines of good character, but there was nothing that didn't fit in between the lines of Jesus's arms, man. And so there was like this religious streak in both sides of my family, man, where there was just like this devotion to fundamentalist Christianity through the King James Version Bible. The Scofield Reference Bible was especially influential. Probably the worst interpretation of the Bible that's ever existed, quite frankly. Sorry to offend, but literally Scofield could not be further from understanding the message of the Bible. So an interesting thing happened along the way. I swam in the water of life, the river of life, devoted to pursuing God, the experience of God and the understanding of God. And it turns out it is a wild river cluttered with crocodiles. Crocodiles all over the place, man, in organized religion. The Scofield Study Bible is a major crocodile, dude. If you were to read that book and believe what it teaches, it was quite a product, because I did read that book and I did live what it teaches wholeheartedly from my youth. That worldview, their system of thought, their system of reasoning, thinking, acting, behaving, dressing, blessing, church, community, everything. I followed their principles from their teachings in my life, and I'm a smart guy. I was able to get down to their principles and see past their precepts, which I'm not sure that they did too much of, actually. I think they stick to the precepts, but I couldn't help but understand the principles behind them, or begin to, and try to make sense of them, only to keep chasing and unraveling until finally the only thing that made sense was the only thing you're not allowed to believe. I mean, I found this one out too, man. This is interesting. There's only really one thing you're not allowed to believe. Maybe there's a few that are like mostly not allowed to believe, and they're pretty tight on. But man, this one right here will absolutely get you kicked out of your church if you believe this. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up, man. This is a lifelong search for truth, and I took that path all the way through seminary, and took it to the end of the earth in the Iraq War. Tested it in the worst place at the worst time. And I can tell you what that produces in a human being and in the world and a thought, because, man, it didn't work in the worst place at the worst time. Because it is the worst news. It is the worst interpretation of the Bible. There's some bad ones. There's a lot of bad ones. That one's the worst of them all. Followed by Calvinism. Calvinism is the most hideous evil on the planet. You know how I know this? Do you know how I know how hideous Calvinism is? Because I was a Calvinist. I will show you my library of Calvinist books. Read them, understood them, knew them, believed them, practiced them, defended them. Took it to the worst place at the worst time and tested it. What does it produce in a man's life? What does it produce? And okay, the gospel was a message that Jesus brought to hurting people to help. He healed them. He made them whole. He restored them. He lifted them up. What did their gospel do? Their gospel tears you down. Their gospel destroys you because their very first tenet is total depravity. Total depravity is the foundational belief of Calvinism. Their belief system begins with the assumption that they are defective and rejected by God. If that's not the most evil thing that's ever been spoken or written on paper, I don't know what could possibly surpass that idea in terms of bad ideas. There's the only other bad idea that could surpass that idea, to believe that you are defective and rejected by God as a foundational core belief, is like a tenet of your faith, is psychosis. It's psychotic. It's not healthy for the mind. Believing that is the sickness. Believing that is the sickness. Feeling that is the sickness. Feeling defective and rejected by God is the sickness. So they're the ones spreading the sickness so they can sell you the cure. See how it works? Yes. Religion is the one selling you the sickness so they can sell you the cure. Yeah. Have you noticed that? They're the ones going around telling you you're defective and rejected by God unless. And then fill in the blank. I'm telling you folks, this is the game. This is it. I was a professional Navy chaplain, the last one in the Navy, from the Navy in the Iraq War. And I tested their stuff. I got the degrees on my wall. I got the books on my shelf. I got the knowledge in my head. I got the medals on my chest. I took their path and the leads to the same place they started at. Death and destruction. They start with the idea that they are depraved, totally depraved, which just means defective, sinful, evil, and rejected, not wanted by God because He's holy and we're bad. Where do you think that starting place ends? It ends in the exact same place. If that's your fundamental assumption, where do you go from there, man? It's like, you've got to stop with that fundamental assumption. If they can convince you of that one fundamental assumption, they win by default. It's like, even if you don't buy their shtick, even if you buy their competitor shtick, or if you buy no shtick whatsoever, just by default, they've poisoned the mind, that way of thinking. Or at the very least, they're planting doubts that don't need to be planted. Why are they the ones planting the doubt? I mean, aren't they supposed to be about building the faith? Why are they the ones going around telling people that they're defective and rejected? Unless you join our shtick. And they all have a magic formula, bro. I was in it. I'm telling you, they all have a magic formula. And my magic formula was a Baptist kind of flavor. It was like ABC. Admit you're a sinner. There you go. They got you right there on A. Yeah, they're trying to convince you that you are defective and rejected by God. They're the ones trying to convince you of that. They're the only ones trying to convince you of that. And how they still get away with it in the 21st century is like crazy, man. It's like, we know that this is psychologically harmful to believe this. It's like, literally, man, I didn't know it was psychologically harmful to believe this, and I followed the path. But I was foolish, man, but I was just so idealistic, and like I was following their interpretation of the Bible, not even realizing that like 1,500 years ago, or for the first 500 years of Christianity, the message was very different. It wasn't, you're terrible and you're wicked and you're going to hell unless you come over here and sign up with us. Join our way of thinking and acting, behaving, believing, giving, serving. Yeah. Or else. But dude, that is psychological torture from a man who lived it and chased it. You can't ever get past that point, man. Honestly, I was religious out my ass. All the way. All the way. I got all the credentials. But if that's your starting point, you can never get past that point, man. It's like if that's your foundational belief about who you are ontologically, dude, there would have to be an ontological change for that to happen. And I'm all about being born again. I've been born again numerous times in my life. It's part of being a spiritual creature, and we're all spiritual creatures. But how are people supposed to be spiritual if, like, the spiritual people are literally making it scary to many, many people to go there? Like, they're terrified to go to like too deep into the spirit world inside themselves and get inside themselves because they've been told that it's terrible inside there, and they're terrible, and they're scared to death. They're going to get in there and find out that all these fears are right. Like, wow, I am a terrible person. I am horrible. I am worthless. I am unlovable. It's like that's all this stuff is like hiding underneath the hood of the car. And, you know, and it can get in there in many ways. But, man, it's like terrible thinking. But then when you got like the church, like the people that represent Jesus, like Jesus, the guy who gave his life as a martyr, really? You guys are representing Jesus? And do you really think Jesus went around telling everybody how horrible they were? And that's why he was so popular? You just didn't even believe that, man. That was an institutional thing, man, that they came up with. Augustine made that popular. St. Augustine, dude, that was like 4th century, into the 4th century, man. I think like 385, something like that. Dude, Augustine has had enormous weight on both the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, which is rare to have a church that influences both halves of that split. And also, the key was so early too. It's like both halves of the Eastern and the Latin Church, Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox, and all of its forms. There was a major split that happened in 1054, and Augustine influences both sides. But Augustine was the first guy who really popularized this whole hell business and the total depravity business. And the reason why Augustine emphasized total depravity so much is because he was a depraved individual. And this is not like an accusation. This is like his testimony that literally he was like a licentious person, and lived kind of a wild life. But then he like got serious and changed his life in Christianity, and he became like a philosopher theologian. But dude, it was grounded in this negative idea that he seemed to carry about himself, and he assumed it was true of all human beings, that he was completely and totally depraved. So you got this guy, Augustine, who actually was completely and totally depraved in his lifestyle and his living. And then he like tries to get himself under control and does so, and he does it through like religion and spirituality. And he has like, but he's writing about like his thoughts on it. And he's like such a great thinker and a prolific writer. He has like a lot of coherence and clarity in his thoughts. He's been hugely influential, and he solves some like he tackles some big theological problems too. And while it's like an interesting situation if you got a guy that smart who tackles theological problems, because it doesn't really matter what he comes up with. It's going to be profound because of his intellect and weight of thought. But here's an interesting thing I learned in my PhD program that I didn't earn, but I did get through it enough to understand how it all works, how research works and putting it together. I wasn't interested in the whole writing a paper thing, man. It was a little too navel gazing for me, man. And I didn't need those letters behind my name. It's just really what you do with it that matters. And a lot of those guys do nothing with it anyway. They're just, it's so funny in ministry circles. They get these long titles and everything, and doctor, and they're all striving to get these degrees. They're the most degreed of all human beings, man. I gotta give it up, man. It's cool running with them because they do think a lot of deep thoughts, the deepest actually. But they're all poisoned by this idea, man. And I mean all of them, almost. The Mormons might be different than this. I like the Mormons a lot. I mean, I don't believe consistently with them enough to join their church or anything, but I love them as a people. And I love the product that they're producing, man. The Mormons are like some of the best human beings I ever met in my life. But, it's just like another fill in the blank. This is the method to, whatever your fulfillment. And we all got to answer that question somehow. And they seem to be answering the question in a way that produces well-adjusted, reasonable, happy people in families. So keep it up, Mormons. I love you guys. But I don't know all their theology. But I'm not sure that a lot of people are getting toasted in their theology. I may be wrong. If you Mormons out there, you want to chime in and tell us more about what you believe. But the other ones, man, because they're kind of their own strain, man. They're like Joseph Smith. Like whatever you think about him or his methodology or his ideas or what he pulled off, and like it's like I know he's a very controversial figure. But him and that dude Brigham Young, they laid the foundation. He was maybe the architect and Brigham Young was the builder, but they laid a foundation that like many years later, like 150 years later or something, is making a better society and world. Yeah, and I gotta give it up for him. But you gotta believe some interesting things to be a Mormon, and I don't find enough. I think I'd have to agree to things I really don't agree to, and I wouldn't want to disagree, or be dishonest to be in fellowship. But I love them, and I love fellowshipping with them. The other Christians I also love. And many of them are magnificently beautiful, and then some of them are like more religiously pharisaical, and it's kind of an interesting little world when you get in there. But it's kind of a tragedy, in my opinion, It's kind of a tragedy that these wonderful, good human beings have been poisoned by this idea that they are defective and rejected by God. That is poison. That is plain and simple. I'm here to tell you that belief is poison to your mind, your heart, and your soul. You are not defective and rejected by God. You couldn't be more like God. If you want to open up the King James Version of the Bible, and I challenge any of my KJV only people to please, let's have a discussion about this belief. Because you're suffering from believing it. It is literally toxic to your mind, to your heart, and to your soul, and to your family life, and to your children growing up in fear of this God. Yes, it's an effective way to control people, but it's so caustic and manipulative and damaging. It's like the nuclear fucking bomb of religion, man. It's like if you can get someone to believe that they are defective and rejected by God unless, here's our solution. On its face, that feels like manipulation. It's just like, no, it's like the mousetrap right there, man. It looks like a mousetrap. It's like, I'm going to get in there. You're promising me salvation. But then you're going to drop that bar right on my nose and slaughter my mental health and well-being by telling me that I am rejected, I'm defective and rejected by God unless I join up. And then even after I do join up and I meet the initial qualifications for entry, and now I'm whatever, and I'm baptized in, and I'm sworn in, ordained, whatever the in, getting in is, whatever there's some kind of a way. They have a list. You're in or you're not in. There's a list. Trust me. All of them have a list of people that are in or not in. Some people are kind of in, half in. They know. And then there's some like, in. And then in the in, there's an inner circle beyond that. And then it's just like these nefarious spirals down to ever closer knit relationships and more behind closed door stuff. Yeah. But trust me, they think that you're in or out. I mean, that's their way of thinking. That's how that's their whole system. Is to every single individual is either in or out of salvation, future, God, kingdom. God either loves you or hates you. It's like he's really mad because of your sins to the point he will torture you forever if you don't sign up, and live the way we tell you to live. The minimum, you got to have like an entry ticket. I mean, you got to go through some kind of an agreement of some sort and ritual and assent. Yes, I believe these things, and I'll, whatever. At the very least, but really, if you want the full stamp, like you want to be sure that you're getting in. You want to be sure you're getting in? Go through the whole process. You want to be really sure you're getting in, and you want to make your life better by living by the principles. You go all the time and you learn to live in communion with a church, and it's a good thing. It's one of the healthiest things that people can do is to live in a community of other people they feel cared for about. They feel loved and wanted is healthy. But when in that community is buried the idea that you are defective and rejected by God, And it's used as like a tactic for recruitment. Like this is their primary tactic of recruitment. Like, I'm not kidding you. This is it. This is the guy knocking on your door. If you died tonight, do you know where you would go? Do you know how many times I ask that question? I was trained to ask people that question. Strangers, like, to start up a conversation just so you can ask them that question. I was devoted to it. I practiced it. I was very zealous about it, in fact, man. When they first told me that this is like the fate of humanity unless I do something about it, as a very idealistic 18-year-old, I was like, oh shit, now I know what I have to do something about. And I wanted to solve this problem because the idea of human beings being tortured forever and ever, consciously, just like unfathomable to me, man. The pain that I felt from that whole idea, like, and I didn't question it because these are like, this is like the church, and like they're showing me this in the Bible. Okay, all right, well, if the Bible says that, and I didn't have the skills to really properly understand the lens that they were looking through that Bible at, to even realize that there was a lens that they were looking through the Bible at. Their starting place is literally like Romans chapter 3. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Do you know how many times I repeated that verse when I was 18 to like 20, mid-20s? Actually, no, deeper than that, man. I mean, I just like, because this is still like an evangelistic verse. If, you know, even in Iraq, man, I get it. Still carrying that stuff, still saying it, man. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's their starting verse. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that verse in and of itself, man. I love that verse in its context and the case that Paul is building up to, that he settles in Romans 11:32. Oof. Yeah, I'm saying that with a little punch. Because you missed that one, fellas, the seminary preachers. You missed the point of the book of Romans. It's right there in 11:32. It's his concluding statement before he rolls into the, therefore, live like this. Live like this, why? Why? Why should we live like this? Romans 11:32 will tell you the answer to that, because that is the conclusion of his theological treatise to the Romans. Paul's letter to Rome. The first 11 chapters are a theological treatise. If you know anything about a theological treatise, there is a point the man is trying to make. He's a very intelligent man, very educated man, studied under Gamaliel. He was the PhD of his day. And he had something to say to the church centered at the capital of the Roman Empire. And they have been misunderstanding his message and misteaching it. I'm telling you that what they taught me, wrong. That's their starting point. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You know why they like that one? Puts them in the driver's seat. You're a sinner and I'm selling salvation. Wouldn't you like some? No? Well, guess what? You're gonna cook like a French fry forever. By my God, who loves you, by the way. Still hope you'll come next Sunday. Dude, the cognitive dissonance that is required to believe that is unreal. I know, I had to unwind it in my mind after Iraq. Yeah. The worldview they taught me came unraveled because it didn't function in the real world. Not if tested properly. I tested it all the way to Iraq, man. If it's not stronger than Iraq, it ain't the gospel, man. If it doesn't work in the worst place at the worst time when you need it the most, it is not the good news. See, this is kind of shitty news. No, this will fail you when you need it most. All that negative thinking that they drill into your mind, it's down there. You may cover it up with all the positive thinking, but once they poison your soul with that and it's down in there, you can cover it up with all the religion you want to. You can cover it up with all the good works. You can cover it up with your morality, rule following, self-denial. I did. That poison is poison, man. I'm telling you. From a guy who swam in that poison for about 11 years, every single day, keeping my body alive when it didn't want to be, swimming around in that morose, disgusting pit of lies, feeling it as a feeler, like the excruciating pain that the soldiers must be in right now if hell is real. If the hell they talk about is real and they're being tortured forever and ever, and I just want to do something about it, and they died before I was there, most of them. Just like hearing the stories now. You can't bring them back, man. You can't go evangelize them. It's like the way they tell it is just like, man, if that's the only way you get in, then probably very few of them got in. And it's just like, whoa, man. These soldiers, like 20-something-year-old, it's like, I love them. It's like, come on, guy, you can't love them. You got to torture them forever? They gave their life for their country. What about the 20-year-olds that are back home just like pissing their life away? And they get to live till they're 80 and get another 60 years to figure it out. Here, this young hero, he got to be tortured forever on top of losing the 60 years he would have needed to figure it the fuck out. Like, damn, don't sacrifice yourself at all. Make sure you live a hedonistic life and stay alive long enough to figure it out. That's the message that sends. No. I wouldn't torture that person. Would you torture? No, you wouldn't. I wouldn't. Whose love is greater? Ours or God's? And if you're like religious, I'd love to hear from you like about this right now. Man, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. But it's all coming to an end. It is all coming to an end. It is psychological torture to continue telling people this lie. It is all coming to an end. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Yeah, I didn't fucking go to hell and come back for no reason. My Heavenly Father didn't allow that to happen for no reason. Because He is love. He is love. God is love. I have measured this and tested this with my life. This is no longer a verse I'm reading out of the Bible. This is an experience I have had with God Himself through hell. Through hell. Through hell. I have walked through fucking hell on planet Earth in my soul. And I can tell you the path to hell, and I can tell you the way back. I exceed my teachers and professors who were unfortunately poisoned with this lie generationally for a long, long time, and I have come to set you free. That is a lie. That is a lie, and I will prove it to you by the Bible, because I can use the Bible just as well as you can, but better, because I learned it your way first, and then God showed me his way. Hat tip to Origen. You slam dunked them, son. You slam dunked them, Father. Thank you, for I am your offspring. Thank you for giving me life again, Father Origen. And we're going to set the record straight about Emperor Justinian the Great, who thought he could have you evicted from heaven. Just hilarious. The audacity for this man, human being, to think that he has the power to excommunicate Saint Origen, who has been like over 300 years. So I'd have to check. I'd have to go back and compare the dates. But you've been in heaven 300 years, and a new emperor comes along with power, and he uses the power of the states to force the hand of the church to excommunicate Father Origen, the greatest of all the church fathers. Hat tip to Rufus. Thanks for keeping the writings alive for us. So they tried to wipe him out completely, but failed. Thank you, Father Origen. But anyway, getting back to Justinian the Great, can you imagine the audacity of this guy to think that he can condemn Father Origen? What did he think happens, man? I mean, he's ruling like on earth legislatively. He's saying, okay, Origen is excommunicated. What the hell does he think happens in like the metaphysical world? So like, was he like now in the mid 500s? Now he's deciding that the guys that were in the club hundreds of years earlier are now not considered to be in the club. What does he think happens like in the real world, like the spiritual world, not his temporal world, where he's like hundreds of years removed from Origen's presence and ability to defend himself? But like behind the scenes, Origen is in heaven. So like the whole, he's doing religion. So he's doing like the whole religion thing that he's pushing heaven and hell. This is like Augustine's thing, and so he's pushing in heaven and hell version of it. And so for hundreds of years, Father Origen has been in heaven, and then Emperor Justinian comes along, writes it down on paper, gets a bunch of religious dudes under his authority to pass it, and he gets evicted. No, Origen did not get evicted from heaven by the pen of Justinian, the not so great. Yeah, actually, he was a great legislator, but he was a good rule follower, man. And the guy, I got to give it up, man. He really did like try to follow. He was so disconnected from spirituality and knowing our Father and how our Father behaves and who our Father is. It's like literally, if you know God personally, you know he wouldn't do that. He would never do that. And that belief actually keeps you from knowing God personally, because it breeds fear inside heart and soul, man. And they also cast God as out there, and then so you're chasing it, and so now you're a carrot. They got the carrot, and you're just chasing the carrot, and the carrot moves every time you move, but they got to stick to. And they'll work your conscience, man. Guilt, fear, guilt, and shame, baby. Fear, guilt, and shame is they trade in fear, guilt, and shame. Dude, they spread fear, guilt, and shame. You spread it, man. You just spread it. Fear, guilt, and shame. And then they cover it up with like hope. And it's a wonderful thing that they do. And I know they got to fund their whole operation and stuff. But man, it's a miserable game that Jesus didn't play, man. Yeah. Jesus was inclusive. He was not exclusive. And they say, he's the most exclusive. No man comes unto the Father but by me. And then they took that and made it as their slogan. They say the same, no one comes to the Father but by me. And then the next snake oil salesman next to him says, no one comes to the Father but by me. No, my method's better. No, my method's better. Man, they had some big ones in church history over this, man. 1054, they had an east-west split. In about 500 years ago, they had a Reformation where literally Martin Luther King kicked off a whole bunch of people. There was a hotbed of frustration with the Catholic Church, and now we've got 40,000 different varieties of magic formulas, man. It's like, so they all agree, and they have to, because literally Emperor Justinian made it like the rule of law, man. You get kicked out. He condemned the idea that Jesus died for the sins of the whole world, period. Like, they're all just forgiven. Like, everybody's forgiven already. Everyone is forgiven right now. Why? Because Jesus Christ died for those sins and resurrected from the dead. But they are scared shitless to say that, man. And they're scared shitless to say that because they have become so dependent upon it as their recruiting tactic. And this is like going all the way back to when they had a monopoly on society, man. And this was like the Roman Catholic Church's method of doing it under the Roman Empire, because literally the Roman Empire ruled the people, in part legislated the people through the Roman Catholic Church. And so, like, you want people to behave a certain kind of way. That's like one of the departments of state, man. So you make rules for how people should obey through the police department, through the church, through all the means that you can exercise dominance over the people, so you can rule them, because that's what Rome did. They ruled. If you know anything about Rome, you know that. They ruled. They ruled the world. They ruled over the other countries. They were dominant. And that was what they did. They ruled the world. So they use church for the same purpose, man. Well, all right. Well, you're in the church. All right. Let's see. Now the Roman Empire is the official state church. So everybody who's anybody is now a member of the Roman Catholic Church in Roman society. It's like the place to be. These are the power brokers, and the power brokers now have control over the machine that doles out salvation. You figured that one out pretty quick. Yeah, well, if everybody already has salvation, then they don't need us so much. But what if they didn't? There's this dude named Augustine that came up with this weird theology that, like, it's very influential, but it's kind of crazy, and it disagrees with like everybody else that came before him, but it could be utilized. He's a smart guy. What does he say? He says, you are defective and rejected. And we get the ministers to spread this message, which completely crushes their self-esteem and their will to fight back, their will to be free and conquer and build their own lives. Yeah, they're easier to control if you teach them they're defective and rejected. Do it. Simple as that. Bada bing, bada boom. The Roman Empire. Injecting the theological point of view that serves her best and demolishes your soul. How about that? Thanks, Augustine. He also gave us war, by the way. St. Augustine was a really nasty one, man. St. Augustine gave us just war theory. Literally, he took the man who wouldn't even fight back to defend his own life, but laid it down on a cross, resurrecting 3 days later. He took that man's philosophy to mean that you should wage war with other human beings. He took the most pacifist teachings and literally warmongerified them. And the powers that be liked that, appreciated that. Thank you. Thank you, Augustine. Thank you for giving these of us these permissions and levers of power. All has got to be done. Under these circumstances, though, because we got to have the moral high ground. There's no moral high ground in war, man. It's not the way the world is going to be won. The world is going to be won by the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. It's in the Beatitudes. It's like the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, the most famous of all sermons. Blessed are the peacemakers. But Augustine gave us war. And Augustine gave us total depravity. But here's the thing. I'm going to bring it full circle now. Here's the thing. I asked Carl and or Loretta Scruggs, how would it make you feel? How does it make you feel to think about many human beings? Many of them you know. Like people you know, like neighbors, associates, neighbors' kids, neighbors' grandparents, grandparents' neighbors, parents, just in the network of people, grocery store, the barber shop, hair cuttery, work. How many people do you know are for sure absolutely in by any measure that your mind, your religious thought tells you? How many of them are not in? So the ones that aren't in, how do you feel about them being tortured forever, consciously, without end? Because if you can't feel that tells me something. That tells me that there's a cognitive dissonance between your thinking and your emotions. You're turning that emotion off because it's intolerable. And I'm telling you from someone who did not turn it off, it is intolerable. But they fed it into the minds, and the healthy mind would reject that and be like, no, I'm not going to feel that. That would feel horrible. No, I'm not going to feel that. And so there's like a lot of people that are like afraid of it in their mind and like, trapped kind of in a religious way of thinking in their mind. It didn't really embody it in their emotions. And their healthy brain actually stopped that virus and trapped it kind of in one little segment, which is like their go to church segment. But it didn't fully get down into their emotions. And so they didn't even really know what that feels like. And they don't even think about it because their mind is protecting them from it. But they go to these churches and whatever. And their mind just protects them from actually feeling. So it's just an interesting little question to ask, to put her on the spot. Like, are you cognitively disconnected from the feeling of this belief? Which is good. I hope she is. I totally hope she is, because that means she's healthy in her mind. Because if she's not, and it gets all the way through to the emotion level, dude, the emotion of that, when you feel it, is overwhelming. It's hell. That is hell. Actually, that is hell. That is hell. It's like hell is in your mind. If you imagine hell, you imagine people being in hell, you imagine. And then it's like, okay, and I'm setting her up here, because I'm going to ask her like one more question. I'm setting her up here. That if she, it's like, okay, if she says no, that she can't really feel that, or she's probably going to try to change the subject or something, but not actually engage with it and say, oh, wow, I would feel like really bad about that and try to emotionally get into it. like, whoa, if she does, then like that kind of starts the process of like healing from it. It's just like, no, that can't be. This doesn't feel like God. This feels like garbage. But if she does, if she does like cut it off, then I might be able to head the whole thing off right then and there. Because so if you don't embody something emotionally, it's not really true to you. It's like until, it's like we got all kind of ideas up in our mind, but how many of them do we actually feel the emotion of those things? How many of them change our emotions? It's like the brain's busy, so a lot of stuff going on up there, and even some ideas. But if you don't process it down to the emotion level, it's just not there. It's still at the information level, and that's like a whole thing that has to happen before you really say you believe something. And the final step is the doing of it. And I'm going to follow that up with asking the doing of it. And it's like, okay, all right. Wherever she's at emotionally, then there's still like, okay, well, if people are really going to hell, think of it. If people are really going to hell, like eternal conscious torment, hell, the stuff they taught me about because they're defective and rejected. And the only way to save them is to get them to join our shtick. Whatever variety it is, this is what they believe. It's their ABC, But whatever you're not going to heaven, you are going to heaven. What makes that difference? Whatever theirs is. How much, is there anybody personally that you have not sat down and had a very serious and sober conversation with about their destiny and the very real fact that you believe, if that's what you believe, that they are going to cook like a French fry forever and ever. They're going to cook like a French fry in hell unless you go over there and tell them that they are going to cook like a French fry in hell unless they join up with your faith. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what's being peddled out there. And then I've met people at like some contemporary churches like, nah, that's not happening at my church. And I'm like so happy. Oh gosh, I'm so happy to hear that there are Christian congregations where this is not happening. They're not peddling in this trash. And I hope it never enters their churches. I hope it never gets in there, man, because it is toxic. It is one of the most toxic things. I think it is the most toxic thing, actually, man. Like, what could be more toxic than hell? What could be more toxic than believing you're defective and rejected? But it's not true. And I'm going to wrap it up here. But before I get out of here, I can't just leave you hanging. Look, open the first page of any Bible. I don't care, King James Version or any version you can read. Open the first page of the Bible. And you're going to read the beginning. It's a metaphor for the whole rest of the book. It's not a literal creation account. Yeah, I believed that lie too. Because they don't understand literature. The idiots in charge of the Bible do not understand literature, and they do not handle it properly. It's a beautiful piece of writing. It's not a scientific article. And like all good books, the table of contents is going to be first to give you an outline of the story you are about to read. So God painted a word picture because movies weren't invented yet. So he painted a word picture of the situation on planet Earth that showed a Heavenly Father who builds cool shit. Creates a home, man. A home. Builds a fucking whole universe of time and space. Dotted with planets and stars and asteroids and all kind of stuff. And picks out a special crib. And like creates it different than all the other rocks in the universe. And it's like the difference between Earth and all the other rocks in the universe is like so extraordinarily different. Somehow it still doesn't seem obvious that there's a God like in charge of this stuff. Like this just accidentally happened. It didn't accidentally happen anywhere else, and we can see a long way out there, man. Sorry, aliens. There's no evidence of aliens. There's evidence of UFOs, but there's definitely fabricated evidence. Yes, fabricated evidence at a very high level, and I don't really wish to get into this because this ain't my shtick, but I can assure you this place is governed by a heavenly Father who made it special for us. Does it mean he couldn't have made aliens? Hubble has not found them. That thing's been out there since I was in high school. So I'm not going to believe the fabricated data when I can just ask Hubble. What the hell's out there, Hubble? Because Hubble's been the hell out there. Anyway. Read the first page. Genesis 1. You're going to find it says, He made it good, 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 and then he made mankind, and he made it a very good. Page 1. It's good, 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 it's very good. He did not create evil. Evil is made up. There's no such thing as evil. There are things that we don't like and can recognize the dissonance of. But their purpose for existence produces a greater good. Is the saw evil for cutting the wood? If it makes the wood usable and valuable to fulfill its purpose? Is the cutting that wood a bad thing? Not at all. Ask the board. The time is being cut, he might feel differently, but when he's shining brightly in his place, fulfilling his purpose, he'd be glad he got cut. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. You're very good. You're very good. You are very good. It says so right in the Bible. You are very good. Chapter 1. You don't have to be a theologian to read Genesis chapter 1. See my finger? 1. First page. And you can know they are full of shit. Full of shit. Yeah. I'm going to give you an alternative. I'm going to give you an alternative Bible. I'm going to give you an alternative way to have your pastoral care needs met. I am Chaplain Scott Schubert. Man, I tell you what, it has been an interesting journey, but I could not be happier to be here with you right now. I could not be happier to be launching what I am launching for the world right now. It was tough and it was painful to go through all that, but it was worth it. It was worth it to figure out the answers. Yeah, the obstacle course was a tough one, man. Nothing tougher, really. It brought me to the point I wanted to die. I'll tell you that much. For a long time, I wanted to die. The obstacle course was, but I fucking survived. And now I'm going to make them wish I didn't. It's not a war against the people, man. The people in that system are actually like victims of the system, man. They're the ones who think they're defective and rejected, and they're chasing their salvation, man. And Jesus said, no, you're not. You're not defective. You're not rejected. You're children of God, and I'm here to redeem you. Because you're children of God, not so that you can become children of God. You were children of God from the beginning. And if you want to know how that happened, read chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. Yeah. It's real easy. He made it real easy. They're the ones making it complicated because it doesn't say what they say it says. That's why it's complicated. Twisting scripture is actually complicated. Reading it and letting it speak for itself is not that complicated. Yeah. Chapter 2, God formed man from the dust of the ground, like a physical creature, like everything else. You know this. But the unique thing is, he breathed into him, and he became a living soul. And he made them male and female, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. And I don't know what you believe about the Bible. My testimony, having searched it out and lived it, is it's very true. But I don't know what you believe about the Bible, but you got to agree that human beings have been fruitful and multiplied. There's like 8 billion people on planet Earth right now. Oh, the birth rate does seem to be slowing, but man, we're not fulfilling that commandment, by the way, which is not good for planet Earth. It says be fruitful and multiply for a reason. You don't want these birth rates dipping. It's just like really dangerous for our well-being. Be fruitful and multiply. It like hurts us like in our mind and stuff, man. To have this breakdown of like reproduction. That's who we were made for. We were made to reproduce. We were made to be fruitful and multiply. That's you. What do you think your purpose on planet Earth is? Be a superstar? Be famous on the internet? Did I tell you your purpose? Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. Nobody is like more devoted than parents. And I know there's like injured parents and missing parents and all kind of stuff. But like normal, healthy human beings, I mean, unless you're like just really traumatized or jacked up or come from like a really bad background of some sort, normal human beings are like happiest when they're raising their children. It's the damnedest thing too, because it sucks. Honestly, man, parenting sucks. It's like hard work. It's 24/7, 365. It's very expensive. It's very taxing. It's very time consuming. It's demanding. You have to give up a lot of other things that are interesting in life to devote to parenting. But it is the most rewarding thing that there is in its own way. Like the investment in these little children and like trying to help them become, all that they can be, and then you're working through it and you're like becoming as well. It's kind of interesting. I think raising my 3 kids was my actual path to adulthood, because I'm sure looking back on it, I wasn't emotionally mature. But I had so much shit inside of me that didn't like make it all the way through the process because there was a lot of survival going on. But growing up, I feel like I grew up with my kids, man. Honestly, it's like teaching somebody else how to do it is how you do it, I guess. You become that. And I will give it up to hardcore religion on this, man. The discipline that they taught me, I'm so grateful for. I mean, it was a lot of self-sacrifice when I was in my 20s and stuff. I mean, yep, my wife, man, she was my first girl. Yep. Yeah, we were virgins together. Hmm. That one made it 25 years, man. But you could probably still be humming along. Um, but hey, life is interesting. And she's free to go live a great life, and she's doing great, and I'm free to go live a great life. And our destinies aren't tied to that one tough situation. It was great when it was alive, and just like moving on. I think she found her a nice guy down there, and I wish them well, man. And I hope she finds happiness, and I intend to find happiness too. But that is that's the deal. He says, "Be fruitful and multiply." Right there on page 2, right after he breathed life, living soul life. Like, have you ever noticed that you're different than the animals? Yeah, in a lot of ways, and it's not the external thing. We all have like a body. I mean, a chimpanzee or monkey is similar to us, so similar that they used to think a long time ago that we were descendants of monkeys. That view is like fading away now. It's like now we realize we are spiritual creatures, and like there was civilization well before they thought there was. And the pyramids are starting to speak from the dead, and all kind of stuff's coming to light. But yeah, you were made by God, and you were made to be fruitful and multiply. And to do that, you literally have to bond. You have to bond, man. There's no way to do it that is healthy at all, man. You can't bring children in without bonded parental relationships, dude. It sucks for the kids, man. Semi-bonded and shit. My parents were married 4 times to each other. You know what that means? That means 3 times they weren't married to each other after being married to each other. 3 divorces, bro. You think my childhood was emotionally rocky? The 1-2 year period I went to, and it was like right at the transition from elementary to junior high. In 6th and 7th grade, I went to 6 schools in 2 years because of all this stuff going on in our life. Yeah. Emotionally rocky stuff in the background there. But literally, man, it causes harm to the kids when they're not bonded well, and they got problems they won't conquer, like addictions and stuff. And then like ways of thinking that aren't healthy. But it starts, and I'm telling you this firsthand, kiddos, because this goes deep back into my family line, and I told you this already, but it starts in that King James Version Bible being translated the way that it is, that emphasizes eternal conscious torment needlessly. They made very bad translational choices to force that, and they may have even jimmied with the books and the meanings and the lexicons. Man, I wasn't scholarly enough to analyze their lexicons. It was hard enough just analyzing their copy of the Greek New Testament, which I think is a pretty faithful one. Hat tip to Bruce Metzger, one of the greatest Christians of our time, to not only preserve a great copy and try to reassemble the original manuscript of the New Testament as scientifically and academically as possible. Like literally, man, Bruce Metzger is such a hero of the faith. And he gets vilified a lot for some reason. I don't know why, but dude, his contribution, along with others, but Bruce Metzger's contribution to catalog the translation of the Greek New Testament and the apparatus and the manuscripts for it, like literally every manuscript we have that we know about is like cataloged, copied, and distributed via knowledge base. He has collected all of them and where they came from, their date, like where they were collected. Some of them are like larger works, some whole Bibles, some of them fragments, even like little fragments that are like very old and they're rare and unique because they're so old. And there's, it's like stuff don't last forever and these writings like wear out. So it's like how close to what we have matched what they had, say, in the year 300, which is, fairly close to when they were written in the second half of the first century. And so he compiled all of this data into the Apora, into like the literally one book. It'll tell you everything you need to know about all the manuscripts. It's technical. It's not good reading material, but literally he cataloged them. And you can go look. And then when they made translation decisions about how to approach like the Greek New Testament, or not translation, but putting it together, how they like weighed it out like by number of copies they had that had this translation, age of the copy that had this translation. For example, if you have like an older copy, which by definition you're going to have fewer of, because it's older, things wear out. So if you have an older copy that disagrees with several newer copies, which one's right? This one has the most number of copies, but this one's older. So like before these copies existed, this is what we know was said. We're not sure if what these copies have was actually said. And so they've done this. But the good news is this is the most amazing news about the New Testament. These are literally the most intelligent human beings working academic at the highest level. They're like the Elon Musks of Bible literary type stuff. These guys are like so technical, like they're engineers over it. To you and me, like literally the regular person, I'm telling you, they found the discrepancies between all the manuscripts, and I'm talking all of them. You can put on a front and back 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You could write down every discrepancy that exists between every manuscript, and I'm talking thousands over now, thousands of years. You can compile them all, compare them all, and every disagreement can be compiled on one sheet of paper, front and back. And about 85 to 90% of all of those are going to be like word order changes or something very obvious that's easy to be like, oh yeah, it says this, but it's a copyist. There's like several kind of general copyist errors that they're like easy to make, and so you start to rate the differences. Like, yeah, that's an easy to spot, and there's like one, and there's 100 that say it differently, and that's an easy copy error to make. So we know who the copy error was. But anyway, it doesn't change one iota about the Bible. They're literally squabbling over haystacks. I mean, just like the littlest grains, of disagreement about how that should be different. And they don't change anything about the actual translation. You can pick any one of them and they're all the same, basically. You're going to have the same meaning. You're not going to get one different idea from one of them that you don't get exactly the same idea from another one. It's not the manuscripts that are messed up, man. It's the translations. This is where it gets messed up. The Bible doesn't use the word hell. That's not in the Bible. That's an English word. The New Testament was written in Greek. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew. The Old Testament says nothing about hell or anything that could be construed as hell. And then the New Testament mentioned some things that they've translated as hell a few times, but very few, and almost always by Jesus, the guy who's forgiving everybody's sins. They attribute the idea of hell to, and they completely miss the fact that he's trying to talk them out of an idea that they had. He's literally talking to religious people who believe in this garbage. He's trying to talk them out of it. And his basic message to these guys is, well, if there's a hell, you're in it. Because hell is believing that you are defective and rejected by God unless, fill in the blank, and there's some measurement. You never really even be sure about the measurement, man. It's like, did you believe? Did you believe? Do you believe in God? Do you believe enough? What about reasonable doubt? Are you allowed to have a reasonable doubt? Isn't it impossible to not have a reasonable doubt because that's how your mind works? Well, does a reasonable doubt keep you out? How much is a reasonable doubt anyway? Well, like maybe that's too much doubt. Maybe I'm doubting too much. Maybe I'm not in anymore because I'm doubting. Oh no, I'm not in. Can you imagine? I'm not in. I'm not going to heaven. I'm going to this place called hell. Forever and ever and ever. What a psychologically sick and abusive thing to teach and say. For God's sake. For Christ's sake. I don't mean that as a cuss word. I literally mean for Christ's sake. If for no other reason. The man you call Savior, stop poisoning their minds with this garbage. And I know it's because you have been poisoned by this garbage. But I'm telling you to stop. It is poisonous to the mind. And that's why he says metanoia, repent. Metanoia doesn't mean repent. You know, metanoia means literally to change your mind. That is the Greek lexicon definition. Change your mind. Stop believing that you are defective and rejected and believe that you are sons of God from the beginning and daughters of God. Sons and daughters of God from the beginning, and Jesus came to remind you of that and redeem you from this filthy thinking that you're anything less. You have the power of God inside of you. You have healing powers, but you're like sick. You're like most of you, many of you are sick. Your bodies are unhealthy and you have disease. Why? You have healing power on the inside of you to heal your body. And you know why? I'll tell you why. This is like part and parcel with the people who lie to you and poison your soul to try to get your business. Yeah, guess what? They're not the only ones doing that. There's like all this food industry is poisoning your body because they're in cahoots with the drug industry that want to sell you a solution to the problem they create. Have you noticed? It's the Food and Drug Administration. Like, food, drug, let's chop them in half, man. I don't want the food people colluding with the drug people because the food's got to go in my body. And if they're getting primarily food out there that poisons my body so that the other guys they're in business with can solve that problem with $1 billion drug and they all get rich off the process. No, thank you. No. I want my food being handled completely different from these fucking snake oil salesmen. The whole system's just gotten a little bit rotten. And every once in a while, God sends like a man along to tell you the truth. I just happen to be that guy, man. I just happen to be that guy. This is my lot in life. Is it the funnest lot in life to play? Hell no, it's not. Hell no, it's not, man. It's not. But somebody has got to tell the fucking truth, bro. It was like, we live in a world of lies, and somebody has to tell you the truth about things. And who's going to tell you the truth? The only way you can know what's true is by testing it, man. And you test it and you're wrong and it hurts. And I tested it wrongly and got hurt, man. But I tested it and learned. I tested the deepest answers. I took what the church said seriously and I took it and applied it fully from a devoted heart. An idealistic youth with a brilliant mind, a deep heart, took their teaching seriously and a conceptual ability to break it down and apply it evenly in other domains. Feel it, experience it, and extrapolate it all the way to mission and purpose in life. With the courage to volunteer, take that shit to Iraq. To Iraq it belongs. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Calvinism died in Iraq. I'm the Calvinism killer. Because it tried to kill me. It tried to kill me. Total depravity? Huh? Bitch, page 1. I'm going to stand on Genesis chapter 1. I'm not even going to beat you over the head with the whole Bible. I am going to beat the religionists over the head with page 1. Genesis chapter 1 is the story of the entire Bible in metaphor. The rest of the Bible is simply unpacking chapter 1. And it says, it was good, 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 it was very good. And he said that after he created your ancestor, the first human being. Well, they tell us we're human beings. You know what you are? You are a son or daughter of God. You are a son or daughter of God, and you always have been. Genesis chapter 1. You are very good. You are very good. You are very good, my friend. You are very good, and don't ever let them talk you out of it. This is the healing for your soul. You are now healed of the disease they poisoned you with. Believe it no more. You are a son or daughter of God, created by God, and he breathed into you the breath of life. You bear his very divine image. It's not your physical body, he is a spirit. You bear his spiritual image. You can't undo that. You can get it dirty. You can get dirt on your uniform. But you can't change who you are. They're trying to poison you, and they've been doing it for a long time. But here's the thing about power, man. Do you really think that someone who eliminates their enemies to attain power should have it? Me either. That person should not have power. And this is why God wins his enemies over. He doesn't just overthrow them. He wins them over with love. And that's why Jesus and the crucifixion and the resurrection. He's God. Yeah, he can. But that's not how it works with divine creatures. We are his children, and he loves us. He doesn't wish us harm, first of all. And second of all, he knows it's just our minds got tainted with thinking, but it's part of our developmental process. He knew it had to happen. He told us, don't start thinking things are evil. It's the knowledge of good and evil. He said, don't start thinking things are evil. As soon as you start thinking things are evil, then you're going to start producing it, because your mind creates, because you're divine. So you think bad thoughts, and your mind filled up with fear, guilt, and shame, and you don't produce this great and wonderful, prosperous life for yourself. And they like that because then they can keep you under control. Yeah, keep you dependent on the system, keep you slaves, herd. Ooh. Yeah, it serves their purpose, but it's not true. It's not true. You are a son of God. You are a daughter of God. You bear his image, and you are very good. And that is truth, boys and girls. Check me on it. Go read it. You'll find you a Bible and read Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2. Test me, because you're going to find that you are very good and you are a son or daughter of God and everything is good. And we need to stop thinking these thoughts because that's what produces the effect. Yep, because we are creators. Thinking evil thoughts produces bad effects. But we win in the end. We win in the end. Of course, he restores everything. That's what he's been doing for these guys are so stupid. They don't even understand literature, man. They don't understand the Bible as literature. They don't understand it's a story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's a story, man, from beginning to end. And it starts in a garden, and it takes this beautiful story all the way through this man and woman who were told to be fruitful and multiply, but then ran into the difficulties of living on earth. And did the one thing they were told not to do, which is eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. What is that, man? Knowledge is in the mind. It's a metaphor, fruit of, but it's the metaphor. It's a fruit, knowledge in the mind, what you know of what? Knowledge of good. Well, they know good. Everything is good and evil. And what does that mean? Deciding, judging, looking at things. That's good, that's bad. Because once you start looking at things and going, that's bad, guess what? That's the poison. That is the poison. Because if you're thinking it's bad, what are you creating? Because you're a little creator. Chapter 2, Son of God. Yeah, be fruitful, multiply, create. Yeah, not just little human beings, man. You can bring your ideas to life. You can regenerate your body, health, wellness. Yeah. It's the food, kiddos. It's the food that's harming us. No, we eat the food that he told us to eat. It's right there. First couple chapters. Eat the stuff that's growing out of the ground. It's life for you. It's right there. Because you're a son of God and you're a daughter of God. Well, anyway, we'll see what Carl and/or Loretta Scruggs has to say. I will keep you posted on this, but I'm telling you, this is the solution. This is the solution that I'm bringing to you, and I paid a hell of a price to bring it to you. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you.